Throughout this webinar, we will explore the intricacies of CBAM, examining its key components, benefits, challenges, and real-world applications. We have here the experts like Shwetam Sinha, Chief Growth Officer and co-founder Only Good, Mr. Rajiv Sinha, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Only Good, Sanjeev Saxena, Director, Auto Management Solution and ex-President Automotive Schaeffler India, and Mr. Praveen Khan, Group Head Sustainability and CSR from Spark Minda Group. Uh, these people are going to share their perspective, insights, and experience, and providing you with the valuable knowledge and practical guidance how to implement this CBAM in respective sectors. I would like to thank all the speakers for joining today, and also thank all the participants who are joining this. And we are really eager to listen what exactly the CBAM and how it is going to deep dive, or how it is going to be implemented in the automotive sector. So before we begin again, I would like to thank everyone for joining this, and I'm handing over to Shwetam Sinha to take this further. Thank you, Shwetam.
Thanks a lot, Ashwini. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking time out for joining this webinar. As Ashwini ji mentioned, I'm Shwetam. I'm part of the Only Good team, co-founder and chief growth officer. And we are hosting this webinar, joint webinar with ACMA. So thanks, ACMA, for providing this platform to us. So very quick context setting. The webinar is about CBAM, and CBAM is extremely important conversation topic, extremely important regulation that's staring at us. We thought that we should have a very detailed session where we educate you on CBAM. So that's one of the key goals for us to be achieving today. Alongside that, we just didn't want to have this session, which is totally theoretical. We wanted you to have the right perspective from industry veterans. And we have three speakers here, Mr. Rajiv, who is the CEO of Only Good, Mr. Sanjeev, who is Director, Aura Management Solutions, and held some very prestigious leadership positions in the past as ex-president Automobile Schaeffler India. And Mr. Praveen Kern, he is again stalwart in the sustainability space, Group Head Sustainability and CSR at Spark Minda Group. So the way we would plan the next 55 minutes or so is we will have our speakers talk for roughly 35 minutes. We want to keep the last 20 minutes for questions. As the whole seminar progresses, please keep sharing your questions on the chat. I will take a note of the questions, keep it handy. And once we open the floor for questions, I will ask the questions on your behalf to the panelists here. In terms of how the whole flow would unfold for the next 35 minutes, Mr. Rajiv will start off and set the context. Initial part, he'll slightly touch upon the basics, because we also want you all to get grounded on the basics. We keep hearing a lot of those very foundational questions on CBAM, so we'll address all of that. Then we will turn it over to Mr. Sanjeev, who will bring in the perspective from a boardroom. He has held leadership positions in very prestigious organizations in the past. So he'll share his perspective on CBAM, on ESG as a whole from a leadership perspective, followed by Mr. Praveen. Mr. Praveen is a practitioner of ESG, CBAM, and he'll talk about what it means for progressive organizations like Spark Minda, who have embarked on this journey way ahead of others. So we will hear from a practitioner, and then, of course, we will pass it back to Mr. Rajiv before opening the floor for questions. So that's how the agenda looks like. Without further ado, Rajiv, over to you.
Thank you, Shwetam, and thanks everybody for joining the session. And thanks, ACMA, for giving us the platform. So this session, as Shwetam said, so we'll start with the basic. I'll talk about why CBAM, what CBAM, and then why it is important for you all, what are the mechanisms. So I'll talk about very basic in the beginning. Once we have heard from Sanjeev and others, Sanjeev and Praveen, then I will talk about the risks and opportunities which lie here. So as you know, CBAM, the full form is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. It's basically a regulatory given by the European Union, where they want to make a level playing field for everybody. So I'll just, uh, sorry. Can you allow me to make presentation? So at least I'll be able to do that. And the main purpose of CBAM is to provide a level playing field for everybody, because European Union has followed very stringent processes, and they would like everybody who's importing goods into the European Union to follow the same standards. So just a sec, I'm not able to present the screen, Shwetam. So if you can present from your side, or that is good enough. So we'll be able to share that.
But
Otherwise,
you can try now. We've given you the host rights.
Just a sec. Yes, so I think I'm able to share. Let me know when the screen appears.
We can see your screen.
Perfect. So there are 6 industries which European Union chose, and these are the ones. So this particular session of CBAM will be very important for people. I'll put certain questions. So if you know these questions, you comply by these, then definitely this session is going to be very important to you. First, you belong to any of these sessions. So generally, any of the industry. So iron and steel, definitely aluminium, since it's part of ACMA. So most of you must be dealing with this one. The second question is, are you exporting? Third question is, are you a supplier to any of the OEMs, or you're working in the automotive large-scale manufacturer space? And of course, the last question that I generally ask is, are you planning to grow in the next couple of years at a phenomenal rate, going beyond the norms? Because the whole industry is taking new shifts, and it's important for business to know where they are going. So if any of the 4 questions is yes, or all of them are yes, then this session will be very important. So CBAM, as we know, it started with, these were the timelines which were set by CBAM. It started 1st of October 2023, where they were given 5 quarters. So there were total 2024 and 25, but 5 quarters of transition period. That was phase 1. And then the next 4 quarters, that is starting from January 2025. This is another 4 quarter of phase 2 transition, where all the manufacturers have been asked to also take care of the precursor, that is value chain, supply chain emissions, also part of the CBAM reporting. Then from January 2026, there will be annual reporting which will be given. Now, to simplify this, I'll give you an example. Think of this as a financial accounting. So this is a carbon accounting that we're talking about. But just to give you a correlation, the financial accounting, what you do is you record all your financial transactions on a daily basis, monthly basis. You have your balance sheets being finalized. And finally, at the end of the year, you do your complete financial report, which is audited by a deputed auditor, and then it is released. If there are any taxations or any kind of TDS or anything pending, so then you have to report back to the government. This is a similar thing. You have to do your reporting based on your sales which are happening, the products that you are emitting, type of emission which would have happened, and then maintain a ledger with each customer that you are doing. At the end of the year, you have to create this file and then generate that report for everybody. Based on the report, whatever taxation would be applicable to you, that will be given. So let me break this part into two part of this one. The first part, that is during the transition period, what does it mean for exporters? So the goods that you are exporting, it is your responsibility to give to the importer all the documents, all the CBAM requirements. The filing will be done by importer, but the data will be received by from the exporting side. From January 2025, it will be activity-based calculation. Earlier, it used to be a default value of the material that we're using, but now it is a process-based emission. And third, which is important part, the penalties. So if you go beyond the norms which are given by European Union, there could be financial penalty, which I will talk again later. What do you mean by the intensity and what kind of penalty that could come to you? Now, looking at the second part, so what we are doing is who will bear the carbon tax? So it will be the importer will actually be filing, but what will happen is importer will actually pass on the penalty to the exporter, so that as a supplier, the liability will come to you. And this could be a significant financial risk. It could also impact the cash flow. So it's important to know the baseline and to understand what your emissions are. So in the current phase, one has to understand where they stand. The cost could increase significantly. It could go up by 30%, which will also have a macroeconomic and a competitive landscape change where countries which are like Russia, Brazil, where the total production and the manufacturing process emissions are very, very low. And finally, followed by audit, which will be all the reporting that you do has to be verified by a certified body, and then they will be passing it on to the European Union for filling it up. What are the processes? So there are 4 basic processes. First, you have to check and identify whether your products are eligible for CBAM. Then comes the product level emission. In your factory, whatever emission happened, direct and indirect, that needs to be recorded for that particular product. And then from the supplier from where you have taken, that also needs to be recorded. So these 2 done. Then comes a third step where there is an Excel sheet guideline given. You have to fill that data. There is an output which is generated that has to be sent to the customer. So this is, in a way, very simple format, but it sometimes becomes complicated if you have multi-product, multi-customers, and also having raw materials from various suppliers. So that could become complex. And this is the last slide that I'm just checking, then I'll pass it on. So generally what happens, the process is simple. You have to define your boundary conditions on where data collection will happen, what all products that are there. Based on that, you define the process, that is your emissions, suppliers' emissions, product emissions that is there. And then followed by that, you fill the data in your Excel sheet. There is a validation analysis, and then is a report is generated. And this will go on quarter to quarter. Of course, from 2026, it will become an annual part. But as a process, it's very important for you to understand month on month what kind of emissions are going to happen. So with that, I will end my part and I'll hand it over to Shwetam so that you can proceed further.
Thanks, Rajiv. So there are a few questions already. We are on time, so I would take the leeway to ask those questions to you right away. There's a question on how is it just EU at this stage, or how are other geographies looking at it?
So EU has taken lead in this case, and they are the one which have started all the implementations. But eventually, this is going. So I was discussing with Mr. Praveen also. So eventually, there'll be other compliances which will come. More stringent policies will be there, and it will expand to other geographies as well. But at the moment, it's EU.
There's another question by Vedant that since we are not part of EU, which is we are sitting in India, if we don't comply, how can they penalize us? As legally, we are not liable to comply with EU regulations.
Right. So if you are exporting goods to EU, or if you are exporting goods to your OEM, who are eventually supplying to EU. So as part of the supply chain, you will be liable and you will be falling under the same bracket. So eventually, if you are part of the ecosystem, you will be asked to comply. The compliance could be a government or regulatory compliance, it could be customer compliance, and eventually it will be part of some of the mechanisms which will be there.
And Vedant, since your importer to whom you are exporting is sitting in EU, everything importer is filing and doing things because they're sitting in EU, but they would eventually pass it to you. So, as Rajiv mentioned, part of the supply chain, you become a party to it as well. All right, thanks, Rajiv. Uh, we just spend some time grounding ourselves on CBAM. We will do a few more sessions on very detailed grounding. We wanted to give you a good flavor at the same time, have different perspective. So CBAM is, as Rajiv mentioned, also very detailed and intricate, like financial accounting. And one also very key call out from what Rajiv mentioned is that come 2026, audits will start. So we have to ensure that our actions today will be audited tomorrow. And hence our actions should be totally well planned without any loopholes so that we are not leaving any opportunities, any gaps where we can get unnecessarily caught in audit. There could be methods of addressing it, but we want to just keep everything clean. Okay, so with this, I will turn this over to Mr. Sanjeev. Mr. Sanjeev, again, uh, I briefly introduced him. Ashwini ji also briefly introduced him. But once again, just calling out his current responsibility, he's Director, Aura Management Solutions. And he has been an ex-president automobile at Schaeffler India. So, Mr. Sanjeev will talk about how a CEO, managing director, a board member looks at the space and what's the current temperature, conversational points in a boardroom. So, Sanjeev,
Yeah.
over to you.
Thanks a lot, Shwetam. So yeah, that's right. Now I run a consulting company, and I was working for Schaeffler before this, and I've also been a managing director of several companies in Minda Group and also Delphi at one point in time. So I have been in these positions for about 20 years now. So let me just give you a top level perspective as to what happens. And to begin with, if you look at any annual report today, most probably you will see a tree or a plant or something green right on the front page. And where is that coming from? And you can look at the top governance companies in India, look at their annual reports. That green thing is actually coming from the ESG or mainly from sustainability. And when Rajiv was talking about CBAM, there was a question that is it only related to EU? The reality is it's just a matter of time. And there was a bill already put in US Congress, though it was rejected. But there are states in US which are very aggressively pushing for it, and there's California ETS, and there is also pollution free acts and so on and so forth. So it's just a matter of time. So let's say we had been talking about BS4, BS6 once upon a time. Those things are a reality today, and those things happened. So this is also going to happen here in India. Right. From when I talk about Shwetam was talking about what happens, what are the talks in the boardrooms. Today, if you go to a mature kind of boardroom, you will see that we don't talk much about profitability, results, etc., etc. Those are, of course, key part for the investors. There is a lot of talk which happens on such topics, especially on the sustainability, because the board room realizes that this is for long term survival, and also to be competitive, to stay competitive in the world, you have to have it. There are if you have been an auto industry for, let's say, last 20 30 years, you would have seen all those things like ISO 9000, QS 9000, then all the standards which came. They came as standards but became a condition of doing business. And CBAM or sustainability is going to be exactly the same way in about, I would say, in less than 5 years, max by 2030, we will see that it becoming a condition for doing business for most of the multinational companies. They are going to ask you for your overall carbon credit and what are your plans to reduce that. Because the trouble is in the ecosystem, if you are one of the suppliers or a consumer or a customer or a producer, you will have to have your own measurement. You will have to have your upstream, downstream scope one, two, three, all those details. People will explain it. You will have to have those, and only then you can we still stay relevant and competitive. The when we talk about stuff like penalties, yes, penalties may be like CBAM is very clear they're going to impose penalties. Like EU is very clear they're going to impose penalty from, let's say, next year or thereafter. But it's just a matter of time when every other country, every other geography starts to do the same. So when we talk, when basically at the top level, when we look at starting from the government, Niti Aayog has a sustainability goal. Today, in every company, well, you will find somewhere they have a sustainability goal. You go to any German company, you will find sustainability goal is one of the key things that is written. If you look at my talks from my days at Scheffler, we were saying very clearly, loud and clear, that we are going to be carbon neutral by 2040. It's a huge task, but there is no other way. You got to do that to stay relevant and also to stay competitive. Because the trouble is that the more and more carbon you produce, you use either upstream, downstream, wherever, eventually it is a currency. Like Rajiv was talking about, like it's a exchange. And today, if you see in places like Singapore and places like also in Europe, there's so many exchanges which are opening every other day, which are trading in carbon. And these are the places who are thriving on this, that people will not be able to either know their like total carbon emission, they will not be able to manage it, and eventually they will have to buy those carbon credits. So it is extremely important for companies to ensure that they have a good sustainability plan. They have a plan how they are going to actually de-risk this upcoming risk and ensure that it does not affect the bottom line. In fact, this could be a great asset to a company which starts working on this early. For example, if somehow you manage to have some kind of a positive carbon bank, look at the how your products, your services can be much more cheaper as compared to your competitor. So those are the things. It is slowly becoming, but slowly and certainly it will be a competitive advantage for the people who have worked on it diligently for, let's say, 4 or 5 years, and eventually those will be the winners. So I think I will stop here now. Whatever questions you guys have for me, I think I would be very happy to take that later. Yeah, thank you. Over
Thanks,
to you,
and
Shriram.
thank you. Thanks, Sanjeev. And keep, we are making a note of the questions which we will ask you all. So thanks for those perspective, very relevant points. Sustainability is a boardroom topic. You also talked about the fact that this can be so effectively leveraged to have competitive advantage in the market. So the question is all about, do we want to just get bogged down by it and think of this whole sustainability as a burden, which we somehow manage and get rid of? Or do we want to just leverage this as a huge potential or huge competitive advantage that we can unlock through this? So thanks a lot for those perspective. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Praveen. Again, Mr. Praveen needs no introductions. I did briefly introduce him in the beginning part, but quickly, Mr. Praveen is the group head sustainability and CSR at Spark Minda Group. Spark Minda Group has been one of the pioneers, front runners in the space, proactively doing things. Mr. Praveen, over to you to take it up from here and share your journey.
Thank you very much, Shweta. Hope I'm audible.
Yeah.
All right. Let me give a global perspective about CBAM, and from the perspective that I have been practicing in my organization, when we supply to Europe, what are the things that comes in, and what is my feel about it, that how is it going to grow, and why did we get CBAM? And if I have to think that how and why do we have CBAM today in place, then you look at the global climate change which is happening, and we are all aware about the impact of 1.5 to 2 degree Celsius temperature rise, and that has to be addressed. And therefore, there are actions like COP28 happened recently in Dubai, and there were various actions which were planned out there. G20 happened in India, and one of the major discussions in G20 was also towards sustainability. Well, if you look at the government of India, we have a Panchamrit policy in place, the 2030 policy, and carbon emission reduction, intensity reduction is two major targets out of the Panchamrit policy. Just now, Sanjeev sir talked about Sustainable Development Goals of the Niti Aayog 2015 to 30. And if you look at these 17 goals, at least five of them are directly supplementing towards climate actions. And being an Indian, I believe I'm not somebody who is needed to have an introduction of something called a Panch Tattva, that is Shiti Jal Pava Gagan Samira. And where we are talking about carbon emission, we are talking about global climate action. Well, with CBAM, I foresee I would be restricting my discussion to six specific points. My first point is the global climate action, where I see that would be a formation of climate clubs. And this clubs is based on the theory of William Niedos, who is a Nobel laureate, and he talked somewhere about the climate action clubs. And one of the club is there in place of us, and we are all trying to comply to the requirements today, the regulations for the weaker climate regulations that we have, and the global carbon which is emitting, and that has to be reduced. My second point is towards CBAM and developing nations. So once you look at the international trade and the CBAM regulations, while developing nations also fall under the international trade, and the low environment standards, which is kind of a so-called tag which is given today to the developing nations, including India. We have challenges in that case, and that the challenge, one of the major challenges that I foresee is accessing European market. And if today being an Indian company, we are looking forward to have our trade with European market, then the carbon tariff, which just now Rajiv ji was talking about, would be applied if we are not complying to those stringent rules, and therefore I foresee hindered economic development in those developing nations, including India, if this doesn't happen. The third thing which I would like to highlight is about CBAM and data. I can foresee the complexity of the calculations of carbon emission, which through Rajiv ji, through his slide, has presented that how critical this is going to be from the implementation phase to the definitive phase when we reach in 2026, and year more to go, when the value chain assessment will also start happening, and the penalties would be there. And if there is a penalty, we should also be advocating about incentivization, which I would like to request ACMA to take up from the Indian side, and then it becomes a game changer if India as a country or developing countries are responding well as far as the response to the climate actions and the carbon emissions are concerned, then there must be an incentivization also. There are discussions about setting the limits for a country like India and other developing countries, that how much emission can be done, and therefore I also foresee a lot of third-party role would be coming up shortly. My fourth point is about CBAM and India. If you look at Indian emission, carbon emission, in terms of per capita carbon emission, we are far below the European emissions today. But unfortunately, in terms of volume, we have very, very high emissions comparison to European Unions. So in that case, probably I even foresee there would be something like an own carbon pricing other than the European Union, which might come shortly. But by the time it hasn't come, we have seen the roadmap, and 2027 talks about UK CBAM roadmap. Today I see that cement, electricity, iron, steel, and aluminium, fertilizer, and hydrogen. These are the few things covered. But by the year 2030, it is expected that more or less all the sectors would be covered under it. My point number five is about the expectation of a fairer competition, and especially for the companies in Europe. So, what was happening is that because of the weaker climate regulation, so called, I would say, there was a disadvantage with the companies in Europe, and there was an advantage. But there would be an expectation in coming next probably 5 years. India and Indian companies would also be having the cutthroat competition, and they will be with this transparency of bringing in, equivalent kind of stringent rules. There would be fairer competition. My last point is about the expectation having a lot of funding towards climate action, which might happen out of the revenue which is going to be generated from CBAM. Well, we as an organization also have something where our one of the factory called die casting division has called AC output terminal, which where we have aluminum alloy as one of our raw material, and we supply it to one of our customers called Zappi, and we have to abide by all the regulations. So we are looking at our value chain, we are looking at our scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, everything we are calculating, and the regulations which is there in place, we are trying to abide by that. Well, I would like to say that as an Indian company, we all need to prepare ourselves for the next couple of years to come. The base year is already decided. 23 October is the base year from where we have to start collecting the data. Data is going to be the game changer. And based on that, a lot of actions, a lot of penalties, incentivizations, and all that is going to happen. So we have to be significantly looking at it and prepare ourselves. We as a country have to prepare ourselves to be exporting things to Europe. Otherwise, there'll be challenges I can foresee. I guess I'll stop here, Shwetam. If there's anything else, I might come in maybe later.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mr. Praveen. Very, very insightful. Uh, Towards the latter part, you talked about the fact that data assets, creating data assets and managing data assets is so very important. Uh, you and I, we have been exchanging thoughts on this for a long time now. And I know the journey that Spark Minda team already has it on this, in this direction. So it's a very, very important call out. Thanks for bringing that out. And along with that, a whole host of very insightful points that you brought out. Thank you. So I will turn it back to Mr. Rajiv here, and just quickly summarizing, talk through the fundamentals of CBAM. We have heard from the practitioners. Now, where do we go from here? Rajiv, over to you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And thanks Sanjeev for giving the high level view for people to understand what does the top management wants. And similarly from Praveen, what are the wish lists from companies and how they have actually started working towards the value chain. So it is important for everybody. Now, in these few minutes, I'll be talking about why it is important for India and for each of the companies to understand where we are. So if you look at the total emission, so there are three parameters here. The green bar that you see, the solid bar, that is the total carbon emission. And the first one that you see is China, followed by India, because India is the second largest producer of steel. But if you look at the emission, that is the orange bar that you see, so which is pretty high for India, and it's in the range of 3. So this is the carbon intensity, primarily from the blast furnace route that I'm talking about. Even if you look at the from the electric arc furnace, that is the lower level blue line, you see for India, we are still at, you see the dotted line over here. So it's still, we are at 1.5. And if you see the European Union, that is the blast furnace route, it's 1.9. So that is what they assume, and they expect that everybody should be following these standards, having reduced emissions for any of the product that they are importing. And this is where they want a level playing field. Now, this brings a very interesting perspective for everybody. When you look at the graph, you see on the right side the steel and the products being manufactured out of Germany, Brazil, uh, Ukraine, Turkey, Russia, and United States. So they are at very low level of carbon emissions, and this can be a significant change, and could also change the dynamics of the total production. While if you understand from ACMA's point of view, India's the total export on the automotive components is going to increase fivefold in the next 6 years. It will be touching $100 billion just from the export part. And when you are looking at that number, so 5x is the growth that we are talking about, then we need to be very conscious that there are important things at play. So I will bring to you risk and opportunities over here. The first thing is, let's say there is a growth and you see at the bottom there is time. And before the strategic inflection point, I call this particular moment as a strategic inflection point. This is a term given by Andrew Grove, who was the Intel president and founder. So what he defined was, if there are major changes happening, and if you find that you are in a position where things are looking vague, that means there are compliances happening, there is growth happening still, there is a regulatory, so there are confusions, and there is a significant change in the whole industry. From ICE, it is moving towards either hydrogen or electric, or maybe some new direction. So the fundamentals of business are changing. So in this case, we reach a point which is called the strategic inflection point. That is the dot that you are seeing. And beyond this dot, the journey is not going to be in the same linear fashion or in the same fashion that is going to be. It will either shift up or down. And these are the changes which I just said. So macroeconomic changes, European Union, then UK is also putting CBAM, then California and Americas, they are putting their own terms for production and emissions. Then there are regulatory compliance. Then customers are also asking for this one because they have also committed their own net zero goals. Business dynamics and fundamentals are changing. And what does this lead to? This is the point where if you stay on this path, if you don't do anything, let's say you have been hearing about this and you continue hearing and then you continue with the same path, then this is the path that you can follow, that is the stagnation, or there could be cutout and decline. So there has to be this green time is the transition time that you see. From the strategic inflection point, the dot, you see a funnel emerging with the green color. This is the time when actually it will start defining how your journey is going to be. So as we speak now, and as there are people in this conference, and there will be others, so ACMA itself has more than 1,000 members, you will see the journey next 2 to 3 years. Some of them would have turned out or come victorious, some would have stagnated, and some would have gone down. And this will happen for real. Because as I said, we are at that cusp of a revolution which is happening. And this is what will happen from 2026. India's total impact on your carbon exports could be 32%. So your cost of goods will increase. You might argue that I'm doing only polymers, or I'm into some other parts of business, but eventually there will be a substantial increase. And if you are in some kind of aluminium product that you're doing, the increase could be as high as 39%. So it's very important. The point that I'm trying to make over here is journey is not going to be standard and linear at the moment, and one has to be aware. So what are the processes that you need to do? You need to first see how, these are some of the processes that do. You understand your indirect and direct emissions, understand your suppliers' emissions, see how much product you are exporting, what is the growth plan for you, and then look at carbon mapping, do a baselining, and accordingly try to automate data, because data is going to be the key differentiator. As Mr. Praveen was also saying, if you're going to maintain, let's assume, I'm bringing back the same analogy that I gave earlier. If your financial book is going to be maintained by hand or by bahi khata, you can think how complex and difficult it will be to match your entries and to make sure that this could be audited and also certified by somebody in few days. If you do a manual entry or if you leave things for a later time, then you can reach a situation where you might be struggling to do this, and there could be heavy penalty and there could be a serious impact on cash flow. So what happens? This brings that perspective of risks in the business, and it brings you the transition risk. It could be a physical risk because of calamity, but transition risk is important for you because of the compliances. And it also gives you an opportunity now. People who are proactive will follow that strategic inflection point and they will take this as an opportunity. Whereas for others, this could be a major challenge which is coming. So you have to see where you are standing and how do you work on this part. So basically, this is a platform. I'm just trying to show that you need to understand the risks that you have, what are the products that will be eligible, and what is the carbon intensity of those products, what is the total production, and then along with that, what could be the overall emission which is happening. And then there could be different regulations and different taxation which can come. So there would be what is the tax impact which is going to happen. So these are some of the parameters that can be brought into play. And if you look at how to work on this part, then basically you have to follow these three modules. You have to first understand your organizational GHG accounting, which is very similar to financial accounting, but this is a carbon accounting where you have direct and indirect. Direct is something which is under your control, under your premises. Indirect is either electricity or your suppliers and the complete scope 3 data, which is outside your boundary. Once you have understood that, then you start adding your suppliers, that is your supply chain and their emissions. Now, once you have these data, it becomes very easy for you to play around. You can do a forecasting, you can plan your cash flow. You also understand which products to be sent more, where you have to focus on reducing. If you are having renewable, then which all areas you are going to put so that your total emission of that product which you are exporting also goes down. You should understand your hotspots, and then you build your product embedded emissions. And in case you are planning to expand your product portfolio, or if you're supplying to multiple customers, then just think of the complexity that it could bring for a product, and let's say a multiple range of product. Then those products, there are multiple suppliers, and this product going to few or more customers. And then there are sales order which you are doing. And then again, the product might also change in between, that there are some design change which happens. To track all of these on month basis is the only remedy and the only way to stay in control. So these were the points that I wanted to discuss. As we talk more about things, I will be showing how the data collection can happen and what kind of emissions which are there. So with that, I'll put my things on hold, and I'll pass it on back to Shwetam, to you for question answer. And if anybody, Sanjeev or Praveen, wants to talk anything, then you can.
Thank you, Rajiv. So we have a few questions. This is a question which essentially checking on how is our government stand on CBAM as on today? What's our government stance and what is the government doing about it?
I think Sanjeev is smiling, so he's ready for the answers.
Yeah. So okay. So I mean, when such anything like this comes, there are the first reaction, not just from the government, but all of us, from everybody, is denial, kind of denial. Okay,
Denial,
okay.
yes. I was.
So that's always the first reaction. So there is a definite denial in industry and also the government and so on and so forth. And the standard responses, which are like, how about historic emissions versus developing country emissions and so on and so forth. I mean, you were showing a slide that per capita emission in India is
Intensity.
much lower than anywhere in the world. But those things don't matter. We are all businessmen. We know it doesn't matter. It will be a rhetoric. it will fall on deaf ears, and eventually we will have to comply. We may gain a year, two, three at max, which I don't see with the current mood in the government and otherwise. I don't see that we are, as industry, we are going to get any leeway. But that's the best you can get. And the key thing here is the earlier ready you are, the better you are. So let's understand one thing. There will be two kind of things which will be happening here. One is who will be cheering the government to go on its path. That okay, let's take it head on. Let's relate this to FTAs, relate this to this and that, etc., etc. But eventually, it's going to see the light of the day. Businesses will get affected either overtly or covertly. When I say overtly and covertly, that means that whether in some cases you will be told that this is why you are being outsourced. In some cases, you won't even come to know why you have been outsourced. Like there is another supply coming from elsewhere instead of you, because at the end of the day, it's European Union's decisions, their company's decision where to source, and eventually it will roll up there. So even if we don't, if we at India keep on crying foul or whatever, keep on doing whatever about it, this is a reality, and sooner we face it, the better it is. And if you just look at the sheer amount of data that we are talking about, we're on these total, I think there are about 800 to 900 items which are getting affected, line items of export which are getting affected. About 27% of your total export from India will get affected. So there will be some like negotiations and so on and so forth, but will it negate CBAM? Absolutely no. The answer is absolutely no. The only thing you may gain is a little bit of time. That too, I if like if I were to advise anybody, I would say please do not waste any time. Go with it. It is going to be a reality. And like we talk about that change curve, the first is denial, second is acceptance. Accept it as soon as possible, and then don't try to react to it. Accept it, leverage it to enhance your business. So that will be my advice to all of you.
Yeah, Sanjeev, thanks. So,
Great.
sorry, Sanjeev, Praveen, just let me finish, then you can add on that. So, I just wanted to add, concur on the same points what Sanjeev was talking about, that denial cannot be the final thing. And as I said, the same opportunity is available or the same challenge is available to everybody. It's the same scenario for all of us. How you see this, what kind of lens you're wearing, whether it is a challenge or a negation, or whether you are taking this as an opportunity, which is very important. At the same time, you might have also started getting some kind of compliance requirement from your customer. For example, CDP, that is Carbon Disclosure Project by the UK, I mean, that side. You might have been asked about the EcoVadis. You might have been asked about supplier assurance and some other portals and some other ways of disclosing your energy, water waste, either in Excel or some other forms. Or if you are a listed company, then you might be also asked to do the BRSR, that is sustainability reporting from the SEBI government. So it's like coming from all direction, and you could only be blind not to see all of this. So you have to believe and move forward. Yeah, Praveen.
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. I just wanted to quickly add the very first reaction from the government of India post that CBAM was introduced. So, government of India initially called it unfair, believing that this would be unfair to price it for both India and Europe, and they find that this is going to impact badly to MSMEs in India. The trade barrier that hurts domestic exporters from India to Europe. However, India also took a reference of the WTO principles, and they said that how CBAM is going to align with the WTO, which also includes the protecting the rights of the exporters from India to Europe. However, India also is looking at domestic carbon pricing, but what Sanjeev sir said, I would like to second to that if you have to do business, forget all such narratives. What has happened? That's going to be something global kind of plus minus as permutation combinations. I mean, I'm talking about it somewhere when Russia and Ukraine war is happening, and one of the highest emission of carbon is happening out there, and European Union is placing the CBAM over developing countries. So we are talking in that scenario, but still we have to abide by that. And if we have to do that, we have to prepare ourselves. I just wanted to add this, Rajiv.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
not
Yeah.
panelists, for your quick reflections on that. We have a few other questions coming in. One question is on the audit part. How would the audit part kick in? When would it kick in? So, Rajiv, do you want to maybe just briefly
Yeah,
address?
sure. So again, as I said, it will be very similar to what the financial audit will happen. So audit will be done for the year 2026 from beginning to year end, and there will be a report on the complete carbon ledger, and then it will also have individual breakup by customer on the total, so that the importers will be given their own share of emission that is they have received from their particular suppliers. And if you want to look into that, so it will be if you want to see the whole ledger, it will be something similar to what will happen is it will be linked with customer, then that will be sale order line items, then there will be products that will be there, and the total weight or quantity, whichever which will be similar to each of them. So whatever has been sent over there, and what period of time, and then what kind of process emissions happened at your factory, and the supplier who supplied. So if you look at one product, it will have the whole chain, and similarly for that customer, it will have set of products, and similarly for all customers, this one, and for European Union, a combined report that will go.
Thank you, Rajiv. This is a very interesting question from Swati. Praveen, I'm going to put this across to you as you are a practitioner. The question is that what to do if you don't have data related to precursor emissions. And the second part of the question is you don't have the data, you're trying to get the data, but how to manage the situation when the supplier is not ready to give the data. So I'm sure you have been a part of this journey. How have you managed this? How have you tackled this?
Sure, thank you for the question, Swati. Well, yes, that's tricky to look at the supply partners' data, supply chain partners' data. Well, first thing, your scope one and two has to be sacrosanct. So first you consider yourself. That part is one part of it. Now coming to the supply chain, this is a process which would not happen in a day, Swati. This is going to take time. This starts with hand holding. This has to have a step of capacity building. You cannot do it for your entire supply chain at a time. They might be different in size in terms of their turnover. You might engage with a supplier who has a turnover of 10 crores. And for them, sustainability is a very new terminology. They haven't practiced it, and you are expecting them to do the calculation for scope 1, 2, and 3. That's a false expectation. That's not pragmatic at all. Therefore, you will have to go for a sample. You would have to pick up some of your suppliers. There are ways to calculate their emissions too, and not necessarily they need to respond to you. You can also anticipate their emissions, and there are agencies who can do it for you today. Somebody like Only Good can also do it, which we have spoken sometime to Shwetam, and they can help you out to anticipate that how much is going to be the emission for that very product from that supply chain partner. This would not happen in a day, Swati. This will take time. But let me tell you, do you have a choice? Answer is no, you don't have a choice. You have to do it. Start hand holding, start capacitating, start getting them login IDs, ask them to provide you with data, look at their data, analyze it, give them feedback, get them corrected, and do it. This is how you have to do it. This is how we have also been doing it.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Praveen. And very, very relevant question. Very good response to that as well. One quick call out from a CBAM perspective as well. Starting 1st Jan 2025, as Rajiv mentioned earlier, we cannot report on CBAM by just having emission data for our supply chain. We need to have activity-based data. That means that the sooner we get our suppliers along with us, the better it would be for all of us. And this is a industry level challenge, and the industry has to come together to make that happen. Thanks, Praveen, for those insights. So yeah, Ganesh, we just quickly checked for CN84. Currently, it is not, but since your importer is asking for it, there is a chance that it might get included. We will also get back to you separately on section CN84. We are right at time. Maybe we have time for one last question.
Shwetam, before you get a question, let me tell you that I even foresee 2030 as an year where many other things and probably more or less all the types of trade would get included under it. That's my anticipation. I might be wrong about it, but yes, I foresee this.
100%. No, absolutely. Uh, you're bang on. In fact, ETS, which is the emission trading system in Europe, will include all the other material, and by default that will start to get reflected on CBAM. I got a quick question on my ping. Rajiv, for you, you talked about data. The question is, how do we start the data journey? What's a good starting point?
So, like, as again, I'll give the same analogy about the financial accounting. So, if you have to start, then you start with very basic. You start reporting, or you start first defining the total framework or your boundary conditions, what all things you want to cover. The easiest thing is start working on your direct emissions, so which are under your control. Direct emissions could be anything which is used in the processing. Direct and indirect, scope 1 and 2, that is called, which is very simple and under your control. So electricity or any kind of renewable energy which is being used, diesel or any of the fuel, LNG, PNG, anything that you're using, plus any of the waste or any of the material part that you're using. So those could be the simple recording that can start happening. Try to get the data collected in some kind of digital format. Initially, you can start on an Excel, but eventually get onto a digital format, because if you make any change or if there is any emission conversion change that happens, then you'll have to do it retro, and it will impact the whole calculation. So follow that thing, and once you have a little confidence, get it verified by some third party. I mean, we can always help, but you can always choose any of the partner. And once you have verified or got the template on filling that, then you can slowly build on that, and eventually take on scope 3, that is some of the parameters which are outside your boundary, and start filling them one by one, like employee commuting, business travel, or supplier emissions, their data. So slowly build and try to build an ecosystem, so that eventually you don't just do a lip service, but you actually start helping yourself as well as your supplier to understand. And this is E part. At the same time, you also work on social and governance part, on your work diversity, employee, and policy and governance. So these are the things that can be done.
Thanks a lot, Rajiv. So I think we are right at time. With that, Ashwini ji, any parting thoughts?
There is nothing as such from my side, but it's very, very interesting to see lots of perspective from the experts are coming, and it's really challenging that how within a span time, how the industry is going to be change that or adopt these new resolution. And looking forward to having such sessions or such kind of workshop where we can create awareness about the CBAM, because which is very important for the industry, specifically for the industry who is utilizing the raw material like aluminum, steel, or etc. So thank you very much for all of you, and thank you, Rajivji, Shwetamji, for creating this platform and inviting all the speakers like Sanjeevji and I'm sorry, Sanjeevji and Mr. Praveen. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, hand it over to you again.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. Have a great weekend ahead. Any queries, any questions? please let us know. We are very happy to just also solve and address your queries. So feel free to ping us on the email ID that we shared. Very happy to respond. Thank you everyone for your
I just wanted to add one last point that in case you all want, you can write to ACMA, Ashwini ji, for any kind of a workshop that you want. So if you want a second level understanding of the CBAM calculations, so you can send a mail to us or to Ashwini ji or to ACMA, whichever way you feel like, whatever is comfortable to you. And we can have another webinar where we do deep diving into the actual calculation. At the same time, we can also have another session for board level members where we talk about the actual risks and opportunities, the transitional risks, physical risks, and opportunities which can be lying with this. So with that, thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.